Hey, I'm Natalie Spano, class of 2026. Welcome to the Rambler podcast.
And I'm Davin Friedman, class of 2026. Before you dive into this episode, we wanted to share a quick message with you.
At Cathedral Prep, every opportunity we have in the classroom, on the field, and beyond is made stronger by the Fund for Excellence.
This fund supports tuition assistance, academic programs, athletics, and faith formation. Everything that makes prep.
When you give, you help students like us thrive.
Please make your impact today by visiting www.cathedralprep.com/give.
Thank you for believing in us.
Hi everyone, my name is Jimmy Smith. I'm a proud member of the Cathedral Prep class of 2011, and I have the pleasure of working here at Prep in our Advancement and Alumni Relations Office. Welcome to episode number 91 of the Rambler podcast, where we are passionate about sharing what makes Cathedral Prep the standard of excellence. I'll be your host for today's episode, and we're excited to have Chris Krug join us as a guest. Chris is the CEO of Franklin News Foundation and publisher of the Center Square, one of the fastest growing news organizations in the country. Under Chris's leadership, Center Square has expanded from a startup concept to a national newswire reaching more than 140 million Americans every day throughout over 1,300 media partners, including USA Today, Sinclair Broadcasting, and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He's also the host of the Center Square Radio Hour and co-host of Everyday Economics Podcast, which consistently ranks in the Apple's top 100 for news and commentary, one that I'm a fan of personally and I enjoy listening to. Before founding the Center Square, Chris held senior leadership roles at major media outlets like the Chicago Sun-Times Media Group and Shaw Media, earning numerous awards for his work in journalism, including the Warren Brooks Award and the National Daily Newspaper Editor of the Year honor. A proud graduate of the Cathedral Prep class of 1986, Chris went on to study at Allegheny College and later earned his MBA from Lake Forest Graduate School of Management. Beyond his work in media, he serves on the board of the Harvard Salient and remains deeply committed to promoting fact-based, transparent journalism. Chris and his wife, Ina, live in Cary, Illinois, in suburban Chicago, and he has 3 daughters. So we're thrilled to have him join us to share his journey from Cathedral Prep to leading one of the most innovative media organizations in the country and to reflect on the foundation that Prep has built in his life and his career. Chris, welcome to the episode.
Great to be with you, Jimmy. I've looked forward to this opportunity, and I'm glad that we were able to synchronize schedules.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you on. It's fun. You're in the podcast world as well. As I mentioned, you've hosted your own podcast a few different ways. So we're excited to have you on. This will be a fun conversation.
I look forward to it.
And you're always traveling and whatnot, and it's nice to see you at your office there. And I see behind you, the listeners to the episode, they'll be able to see it in a picture. You have the nice Prep Ram envelope right behind you there, so it's good to see you repping the black and orange behind you too.
Oh yeah, I mean, prep is so important, to me, and in my life. I'm proud to be an ongoing supporter, and I love the opportunities I have to come back to Erie and just kind of see how prep has grown into what it is today. I mean, obviously the Salata Center is really something else, and it's just such an important part of the fabric and the future of Erie. And even though I haven't lived in Erie now for quite a while, since 1994, Erie's always going to be an important part of my life.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And I know it was fun having you on the Prep campus, I think a couple years ago now, to show you all the updates, the renovations, some of the spots that look exactly how you may have left it, back in 1986.
Yeah, the old and the new. I mean,
yeah,
the traditions are so, I mean, they're so important. And I think, as prep has grown and evolved, I think maintaining a lot of what was there for those of us who, passed through the hallways, I guess now it's like many years ago. Gosh, I think it's going to be 50 years for me next year. Or not 40, I'm sorry, I'm dating myself, 40 years.
Yeah, don't add too much time on you yet.
Yeah, I didn't graduate from prep when I was 8. I left when I was 18. So, but it's great to see what's been preserved, but, also what's been built and what you guys are building. It's an exciting time. I'm sure for everybody at Prep, and for those of us who are, continue to root Prep on in, doing what it does. I mean, it's just not every Catholic prep school has been able to make it work. I mean, as we even know from just Erie. I mean, just sort of the history of Erie parochial high schools. So I mean, I think it's really amazing what's going
Yeah.
on.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And, it's not the work of course, one individual. It takes all of us as alumni to come together and support the school. When I say alumni, and that also, of course, means, family, friends, everybody kind of being able to support what we got going on here. As you mentioned yourself, being a supporter, and we appreciate that of you and others who are listening to this episode who have supported through the years. It's been great to see us rallying together to support the initiatives of the school and help the advancement of for today's students that are here. And and that's probably a good segue, to kind of talk about maybe a little about yourself. Maybe listeners who aren't as familiar about who you are necessarily. What led to your decision maybe to attend prep? I don't know, 1982, 1981.
Well, I grew up in a family. I moved to Erie in 1980, and so I attended Catholic parochial grade school in Pittsburgh, where my brother Danny, who's class of '88, we grew up there. We moved to Erie in 1980, and I finished up at St. Andrews over on 6th and Raspberry, and that there really wasn't much of a choice for he or I. My parents were adamant about us going to prep, and we weren't opposed, but I wouldn't say that we had a vote. It didn't exactly work like that. So, but we both even like even after just a couple of years, and that's really what it was for me. I think the 7th and 8th grade in Erie, and we understood the value of prep, certainly compared with what our other option would have been, growing up in Mill Creek. And I guess I could say there were technically options, but there really wasn't any choice. So
Yeah.
and frankly, my brother and I think some of the conversations that we continue to have, Erie was such like a it was really and certainly the times of our lives, right? It was a very influential part of, I think, for both how he and I look at the world now, and certainly as we were going through it, in our time at prep, we understood that we were part of something that was unique and important and special. The discipline that we were able to achieve, I mean, the expectations that were set, and they were really good for us. I mean, they were really, really good for us. And I am sure that while the students are making their way through prep, they're talking to their friends that may be going to other schools, and they're like, boy, you seem like you're doing a lot of work. The work is ultimately, on yourself. You're making an investment in what your future will become, and who you will become, the kind of person that you'll become. And so it's a lot easier to look back on that. I guess it would be, I don't know, I said 40 years, but I mean, yeah, I guess that's right. I'm class of 1986. It's going to be 40 years next year. And I don't know that I'd be where I am today, doing the things that I'm doing had I not gone to prep.
Hmm. Well, that's really cool. And I guess you may have mentioned it at one point. I don't think I really realized that you weren't necessarily from Erie. You were here, like you said, you guys moved in 1980, right before your high school years. So you talk about just fortunate timing, and
Yeah.
to say the least, for you and your brother to be able to be right before you're entering high school years, to be able to attend prep, experience that. You talk about how a lot of your success can be credited to that foundation that you received from prep. Were there, when you think back of your time at prep, are there certain teachers or coaches or, things that happened while you were a student here at prep that really stand out to you as part of that fabric of your memory there?
Yeah, I mean, without question, I mean, Stan Brzezicki, is not only as my first math teacher, but as my baseball coach during the time that I was there. I had an unbelievable relationship with him, teacher to student, and then ultimately friend to friend. Jim Shar, Jim Shar was kind of the guy that got me hooked on journalism. Joanne Maxwell was just like an unbelievable, I mean, still the toughest, but at her core, one of the sweetest and most caring people that I think that I had an opportunity to work with. I mean, the list is frankly very long. Because I think the one commonality of the prep staff while I was there was that they were genuinely interested in you becoming the best person that you could be, the most accountable person that you could be, and the best educated person that you could be. And they took that personally. I mean, your success was ultimately the reflection of their success. And not everything you're going to do in life is easy. Not everything that you are going to do while you're at Cathedral Prep is easy. But I think that that's kind of the point of a life worth living. If you're not stretching and challenging yourself and being challenged to be better, then you won't get better. And I mean, I think that manifests itself later in life, in your professional career, no matter what it is that you choose to do. I mean, I just happened to go into journalism. But I have friends that I went through prep with who are, doctors and lawyers and successful business people, and people that have inherited their legacy family businesses. They're still in Erie, and it's great to see the success that they've had doing the things that they're doing. But I don't know that any of us would have been able to do everything that we've been able to accomplish had they not had that experience. It's the discipline of a college preparatory education inside of a Catholic environment, and all that comes along with that. And I don't think over the course of the time that's passed since I left prep that the standard, that the expectation for the students has changed much at all. And in fact, I think with technology and the improvements that have occurred just broadly, in the world, I mean, like I grew up on like a dial phone, right? I mean, I was talking to somebody about, like, I mean, it probably was one of my own kids. Prep had rules. Like, if I forgot, first of all, I didn't live next door to prep. I lived 5 or 6 miles away, which when you're 15 years old is kind of an insurmountable distance away from where you go to school. If I left something in my locker that I needed to work on that night, I couldn't, aside from phoning a friend and asking them to literally read me, all right, question number 1, what are the fractions that I need to work with here on this math homework? There was no way to get it. I couldn't go online, and I certainly, didn't have, extra access. And I believe at the time the rule was that unless you were like on campus to be, doing something that's approved, like practicing or training or something like that, you couldn't. Even if I could get a ride back into prep, which I wasn't able to get, didn't have that available to me, you weren't supposed to be there. And so you had to deal with the consequences of not putting that worksheet, in your book bag to take home, or not bringing that book home that you needed, or, vice versa. If you left that book at home and you didn't bring it with you to class, or whatever the case might be. And while that might seem kind of like a trivial thing, I think that it instills a degree of discipline in life that lends itself very well to business. You've got to be put together, and you've got to be prepared, and you have to, made that checklist, whether it's in your head or on a literal sheet of paper or in your diary or whatever it is that or now your digital calendar, to make sure that you're where you need to be the next day.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, to your point, alumni of prep and of Villa that are listening to you talk, they're certainly not in their head agreeing, like, yep, that's exactly what I got out of my 4 years of being at prep or Villa, is it helped lay that foundation for me to be able to translate. You mentioned, like, for yourself, you went into journalism, but a lot of your classmates and people went into different areas of study. And that's the same for the students today. There's still that standard of excellence that our faculty expect of our students. And it does require more discipline. It requires more extra work. It requires more focus. But you look at the results of who you're becoming through those 4 years, and then what our alumni get to have been able to go on and do. That the 4 year grind of being here at Prep is going to help prepare you for that next level, whether it's college, business, whatever, and beyond.
Yeah.
It's part of that fabric of who we are, and it lays that foundation for us all.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think in a lot of ways, I wound up going to Allegheny College, and it was, Allegheny was a fine school at the time. I really, I can't specifically speak to, what's going on at Allegheny now. I mean, schools change and evolve. But, in the time that I was at Allegheny, the rigor and the level of care that you received, even though it was a smaller school, really didn't match the level of rigor or the expectations that you had at Prep. And, college, I think, is really, it's changed a lot, I mean, and the college experience has changed, a lot. But the foundation, I think, for most of the way that I live my life and operate, as a professional, I would trace it back more specifically to the time I spent at Prep from the standpoint of, again, expectation. And I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I don't think that there was a more important 4 years academically for me than the time that I spent at Erie Prep.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that all as well, because I think, for us, that's what makes me so proud to represent the school in the capacity I'm able to, with the work I do here, be able to connect with people like yourself and others who are proud to be Ramblers, proud to be Victors, proud of what, they were able to do and at their time at the school, go on and then do in their career. And then be able to see that we're still here, forging the future for these kids that are at Prep today. Many of them going to go on and be future leaders in whatever industry that they choose. And a lot of that, of course, the school looks different for Prep and certainly the alumni. There's a different cadence and a way things are done just with emerging technologies and things that are happening in today's climate of education. But when you look at the fabric, the DNA of Cathedral Prep and Villa Maria Academy, all the things you just talked about, that still is permanent today to the students, in terms of their academic experience, their athletic experience, the faculty, the care, all those different things. And it's pretty cool, reading your bio and the things you've been able to go on and accomplish, and the work you do. It's quite impressive, and I'm excited to dive a little bit into that with you here on the podcast and chat with you about that. And you've been able to build the Center Square from a concept that has now turned into one of the fastest growing news organizations in the country, as I kind of read in the bio. I guess it's kind of a twofold question, but one, can you talk us a little bit, kind of an introduction to how you kind of got into this, what kind of shaped and formulated this, and then to follow up on that, what do you think has been leading to the success of that? What have been some of the decisions that you've had to make that fueled that growth that you've been able to experience in your work?
I think that's a great question. I left the industry, the journalism industry in 2012, and not by my own accord. I was let go at the Chicago Sun-Times because I was trying to make changes to the way that the organization operated, specifically in the suburbs, and working with new leadership at the time. I mean, I came in with a new leadership group, but not part of that or ownership group, I should say, but not part of it. I hadn't worked with them before, and we wound up having significant philosophical differences about what makes sense in terms of the role of a local news outlet. And when I left, I swore that I would never go back to journalism, because at the time we were already seeing like the leakage. The housing downturn in 2008 followed the best year in the history of the newspaper industry in terms of revenue, and it has spiraled downward since then. I mean, even adjusted for inflation, it's spiraled downward since then. But I I think that the 4 years that I was out of the industry were really important to me. I was president of a creative agency for, I don't know, maybe about a year and a half. And then I had an opportunity through a friend of mine to kind of take a real departure. I mean, whereas at the agency, I was still working in presenting brands to journalists, and there was cohesion there in my experience. But I wound up traveling abroad for about 2.5 years, and I mean, I was doing, I don't know, 100 and some thousand miles of air travel a year. I mean, literally spending weeks at a time in Asia and South America and Europe. And it was at that time, I mean, it really got to be a news consumer again. And I saw that, things that were happening, in news, the way that news was being presented, some of the hallmarks of the industry that frankly made it most valuable were being forsaken for advocacy. And, while I was running my operations, I mean, it was really at the core of our work, and the real reason that the news media is essential in the United States is an understanding of what government is doing. And so government accountability used to be core to the way that the fourth estate, the so-called fourth estate, operated. And it had really lost its way. And so in thinking about what might be possible, I had an opportunity to come back and take over some assets that were struggling in Illinois. But then soon thereafter had a national opportunity where I would merge my assets that I was in charge of operating into its own 501c3 nonprofit, and to take the work that we were then doing in Illinois out nationally. And the thought was that, the Associated Press very specifically had created a massive gap that needed to be filled. And I mean, and I come at this, I was the president of the Illinois Association, or the Illinois Associated Press Editors Association, which is really a kind of a clumsy word for being like AP Illinois president. Where in my capacity as a news editor at the time, I worked in collaboration with other Associated Press member editors to try to shape the way that the AP did work for the benefit of the audiences that we served. And, for me in my markets, the AP fell short. I mean, it really didn't, even then, and this is going back like 13, 14 years ago, it had sort of abdicated its responsibility for the taxpayer's perspective in its reporting. I mean, we all support government, I mean, with our tax dollars, and how they get allocated really does explain to those who are paying for it whether government is doing a good job, a bad job, or no job at all. And so we incorporated that philosophy as core. We only focus on government accountability reporting, size, scope, cost, and effectiveness. We produce short, fact-based. We don't do any opinion on our own. Short, fact-based stories that are written for the benefit of a national audience, but utilized by partners in local markets about local, state, and federal, governmental news. And, when we started out, it was, we were really small. We had no partners. Today we have 1,360 some, and they all have come to rely on the way that we do what we do to inform their local audiences on, again, size, scope, cost, and effectiveness of government, and to do it quickly, and to do it, concurrent with things that are happening in the news cycle. And that gap, in the market, I mean, I would say, among all things you could tie back to prep. I mean, I think that the teachers I had in particular, Sister Jim, and, and sort of like, I think I might've been part of like the first class that Sister Jim had where she was full-time at prep. I mean, the idea of getting kind of like outside of yourself and thinking about what's possible, I would say I would have to give her some credit for that. I mean, when you get essays back that say, how about using your imagination there, fella, or whatever, in the kindest way possible.
Right.
The ability to look at the problems to solve, ultimately the jobs to be done. I'm a huge fan of Clayton Christensen and the disruptive innovation thinking, that he did prior to going to the Harvard Business Review. But I had an opportunity to work with him personally, which, I think was really important. But, it's like regardless of what pursuit, of career, that willingness to evolve and to innovate and to think about what are the problems, not that you have, but what are the problems that the market has, it gets you somewhere. And for us at the Center Square, it's our willingness to be differentiated, but to do something that's altruistic and based in fact and focused on the needs of our partners and their readers. That's allowed us to grow the way that we've grown over the last now 6.5 years.
Yeah, and I could imagine that. I really appreciate you kind of going through that all, because I think for somebody who's a consumer of media and content and news outlets, social media world, or wherever it is that I'm consuming information, I think that's something that I've kind of seen as a trend, is this idea of low trust within the media nowadays, because there's always this thinking of, well, what's the filter in which they're describing this story? Which side do they lean? What are they talking about here? And I think everything that you're talking about in terms of that fact-based, story, the government accountability sort of thing, and not putting it with a lens of this is my opinion or this is how I think it should be. I think that's speaking to a lot of people, hence, the growth that you've been talking about or that you've been able to experience that as I read the bio. I think it just really resonates with people. I know for me personally, that's the type of thing that I want to be informed. I want to know what's going on, and I'll form my own opinion. But let me see kind of what it is that's going on in the world today. And I appreciate you laying out that way. And do you think it's difficult sometimes for when you're in the business of media to walk that line between fact-based and opinion, especially when you're kind of more in the know than the average person, right? I mean, you're in this world.
Yeah. Right. It's so like a couple of things. You mentioned trust, and in the recent measured trust, I think it was Gallup that came out with this number. So it's something in the neighborhood of like 28% of Americans trust the American media. And I'll throw another number at you. That from the standpoint of daily political consumption and conversation, only about 8% of Americans talk about government and politics and policies on a daily basis. So, if you are a casual news consumer and you rely on single sources, and if those sources are primarily, the larger networks or the larger cable providers, effectively, here's what's happening. You are consuming news that is being generated by a very small number of people relative to the size of the industry as a whole. And the sensibility of that news is being dictated in, as it pertains specifically to network television, by people that operate in maybe like a 1 square mile of each other, in New York City. And certainly, what comes out of the federal government, that's a bubble in and of itself. And so, for us, not being headquartered in either DC or New York is in our opinion, it's an advantage. Having reporters that are spread out, all over the country, focusing on issues state and local, not just capital reporting, but issues that matter in major metropolitan markets and across states. It's a huge point of differentiation, because we're talking to real people about real stuff. And I think that it's tough. I can tell you from the time that I was out of the business and looking at it as a news consumer, even with the amount of time that I'd spent in the industry, I'd read a story and you could just see the gaps in it. Like why wasn't this question asked, or where's the balance to this, or how is the reporter getting to this expressed point of view within a straight news story without citation or without a source confirmation or anything other than a leap. And it's I think it was like I said, it was really that kind of drove me back to the industry, because I spent time in China, and I had as an American businessman overseas, they identify the fact that you're an English speaker, and this was kind of like for me, this is like sort of the epiphany I had. I was sitting in the Jumeirah Hotel in Shanghai, and young lady literally selling like cigars and cigarettes, like you'd see out of a movie, came up and asked me if I wanted to buy a cigar. I had one in my hand, so I mean I was good, and so I declined to buy anything from her, but she gave me a China Daily, and I sat there and I spent time like reading it. I had foreign media is banned in China, and so I had happened to just forget that I to take my Wall Street Journal out of my travel briefcase, and I was sitting there reading today's story in the China Daily against the last edition of the Wall Street Journal. Meanwhile, I just gotten off a 15-hour flight. I'm feeling like, am I just like so tired that I'm not making sense of this? But to read antithetical versions of stories that had already been published, the day before, whether it was in, the Wall Street Journal, or whether it was in the New York Times, or whether it was in, some other U.S. Publication, financial stuff. I was like, this could happen in the United States. And I think we've seen some of that occur with regard to the advocacy positions that a lot of the major metropolitan, specifically East Coast, I mean, truly East Coast, like New York and DC, and what they published. And then it takes, once somebody hears something one way, and from, in theory, an authoritative source, that the undoing of that, to get to the truth and the fact is, it's very, very difficult. I mean, we're not, the Center Square is not here to undo the reporting of other people. We're here to do original reporting and then to share that in real time. And so I think one of the things I'm most proud of with regard to what we've been able to create with the Center Square is that we're able to move fact-based, data-driven, citation-driven news in something resembling real time, and to provide our partners across the country with meaningful reports that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get on their own.
Well, so here's a question for you, and something that I'm going to be selfish in asking you this question, but I think the listeners will also get out of it for sure. So how, in this world of social media, I've even heard it described as social interest, media, it basically, because of the way the algorithms work, is we're getting fed content, and it's not so much about who you follow anymore, but it's about just what interests that you have. I guess, my question for you is, one of the things that I've been thinking about, I have young children. My oldest is 7, and eventually we'll be pushing this off. At one point in his life, he's going to be on social media, and
Sure.
trying to teach my children how to evaluate information and how to check these things for sources, or how to you get all these different things coming at you from so many different angles. How do you know what's real, what's not, what's opinion, what's fact? And I guess, my question for you is, how would you advise me, as a parent of 4 young kids, how to teach
Right.
my kids to evaluate news and information? But I think also for me too, to know,
Sure.
how should I be looking at the world today to understand what's fact and what's opinion, things like
Yeah,
that.
that's a great question. I mean, I don't know that they've replicated this study, which is survey based. I want to say this within the last 5 to 7 years. It might have been the Pew Foundation that pulled this out, that only 1 in 4 American news consumers can determine between fact and opinion as they read it. And when you speak specifically to social platforms and who's participating in that, a lot of that is influencer driven. And the fact of the matter is, the vast majority of influencers don't generate their own news. They are interpreters of other people's work, and they have their own sources, and a lot of them, I would say, are not conscious of reading multiple sources to balance what it is that they then take to market, which further confuses the newsreader and diminishes trust overall in media. I think having a diet that allows you to consume as much news from as many sources as is possible is really relevant. I mean, of course, I'm in the business, so I not only have to pay attention to what we're publishing at the Center Square, and we produce somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 stories a day from across the country. I've got to read, what the Associated Press wrote about the things that they wrote, whether it's a story that they had that we didn't, or the other way around, or if we both had the same story, how they reported it, who they talked to, and then balance that against, a broader diet that would include, local market television. I'm here in Chicago. It's a robust TV market, third largest media market in the United States. And then, the networks, which there's a relationship in a lot of markets between your local news channel and the corporate entity. But also, the cable news outlets that, largely work off of the reporting that others do to interpret, explain, and opine on what the news means. Something that we're staunch about, and I mean, this is something that's discussed. And I'll tell you what, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Dan McCaleb's our executive editor. He's actually technically our chief content officer, and Dan McCaleb is a Cathedral Prep class of 1986 graduate also. So I am blessed to be working with fellow Rambler on a daily basis. And I think something that we talk about a lot that's important to share here is that our work is really not supposed to tell people what to think. That is where media gets it wrong. And it's where, when you're reading something or listening to something or watching something, and you feel like this is only leading you to one place, that's not a great source for you, or certainly shouldn't be a single source. But if you have an interest in whatever it might be, whether it's, state legislative stuff, or city hall type stuff, I mean, or certainly federal stuff. I mean, we've been credentialed at the White House now, I think, for 4 or 5 years. We're now hard card credentialed. In fact, the story about Antifa being designated a national terrorist organization and then an international terrorist organization was a question that my reporter asked President Trump in the Oval Office to start that story, and then
wow.
What has come from it. But it's important to, as a news consumer, to be disciplined enough to not rely on single sources. You don't want to just be reading news that you agree with, or listening to news that you agree with, or watching news that you agree with. That there's often more to the story. And I mean, right now, there are a lot of things that are happening in the United States that are being reported maybe one way. And I would say that that's been kind of a phenomenon of the last maybe 10 to 15 years. So with the birth of news sources of information, some of them are valuable. And I mean, find the ones that you can trust, where what they're telling you lines up with ultimately what is known about whatever it is. I mean, even if it's like the NBA or Major League Baseball, or what's going on in the arts scene, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. I mean, having a single source of information and going with that, I think, puts you in a disadvantage with your quest to truly understand what's happening, in whatever subject matter. Right?
That's a good example. So the Twitter or X accounts I follow strictly on the Steelers and why they're going to be in the Super Bowl this year,
yes.
A little bit biased in regards to the reporting of those influencers.
Yes. How many times have the Steelers been trading for Justin Jefferson or some other like pie in the sky thing? And yeah, right. And so I mean, it's like discounting your feed. Part of it though is just to take a somewhat austere look at, well, it's the source of this information. Some rumor that was floated on radio that was picked up by somebody in Thailand and then pushed back out to one of these fan sites that are just traffic generators. They're just they're basically honey traps for advertising. sexy headlines that don't have any connection to the truth. That is not just relegated to coverage of the NFL. That is a broad issue that faces news media consumed through social channels. So having a broad diet, being willing to spend time against the news, I think is really it's really important if you truly want to understand what's going on. Form your own opinion, but have multiple sources for the information that you want to take in.
Well, I appreciate you your stance on that and what you're able to provide through your reporters and through your organization. I know I'm also appreciative you kind of running us through that, because I think, like I said, for me, living in this world for myself and my wife and 4 young kids, you want to try to raise them in an environment that they're informed, but they have the ability to form their own opinions off of that information as well. And I just have I know we're getting low on time. I just got a couple more questions for you to run through before we run through there. I'm going to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit, where I want to ask you in regards to a question about leadership, kind of stepping aside from just the idea of news specific, but you've had the opportunity to lead an organization and do the different things you did. One of the questions is that kind of when you assess the world of leadership today, and the conversations you've been able to have with other leaders and things that you're learning as a leader yourself, what qualities do you think are some of the most undervalued in terms of building and strengthening a high performing team? Something that us is, regardless of what industry we're in, something we can learn from you on that you've been able to experience in your leadership.
Well, that's a great question. You really never have to stop. You can't stop growing as a leader. You have to be a good listener. There is this thinking in leadership with regard to, the way that you manage, that's called the 72-degree rule, where you really want to try to keep the temperature in your organization like a thermostat set at 72 degrees. I don't know that I've always been very, very good at that. I'm very passionate about what we do and our success, and I know I drive my team very, very hard. I think that it's important to look in to what it is that you're doing, but it's equally as important, or perhaps more important, to look out. The needs of your customers ultimately should be the driver of the direction of the organization as a whole. A great business that doesn't have any customers isn't a great business. And, if you're not interpreting and understanding the needs of the marketplace, whether you're making ball bearings or you're making, journalism, I think you're not going to succeed. So with that, I'll tell you, comes this somewhat nagging feeling of dissatisfaction or unfulfillment or need to improve. I guess it depends on how you look at it and what kind of I would say it depends on what kind of a mood I'm in that day, whether it's one of those three things or it's another thing. There's just no way to be any good in leadership without having some personal investment and an emotional connection to the overriding success of the organization that you lead. I think about it in these terms. I mean, I've got, or we as an organization have, 40 some families that need, that work for us. And then there's an entire other group of people who, work as contractors or freelancers, who, we have a mutual benefit relationship with, where they pitch stories to us and we accept them and we pay them for them. And we come to rely on each other, but you have to be doing the right things. So how do you get to do the right things? Well, that's not so easy. Again, whether you're, making ball bearings or whether you're creating journalism. So if you're not looking into your organization and making sense of what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it, and whether we're all on the same page and adhering to a standard, and you're not looking out at the industry to see how things are changing. I mean, when I started in this business, there was no internet. I mean, I just had the good fortune of being a little bit ahead of schedule as an editor. My first time as a number one editor, I was 35 years old. We were just kind of getting off of dial-up and into broadband. And I thought that the internet frontier was exciting. Whereas a lot of my peers, and again, I was probably about 20 years ahead of other people that, held this kind of responsibility. They were thinking that the internet was a fad. Well, that is proven to be not true. I got that one right. AI and what's coming with AI I don't believe it's a fad. I mean, I think that there are some real challenges with the business modeling of AI, but, from a standpoint of automation and information, I mean, I think it's relevant. You're still going to need people to create original work, and the reporting responsibilities and editing responsibilities and publishing responsibilities aren't going away. But for my friends that are in publishing and broadcasting, the challenge is, how do you build a business around that? Well, that's also my challenge. How do I help them to build a business around that? I do things for them that they can't do for themselves. And that's easy to say and not so easy to do, but that's kind of I would say that the nature of that, as it's applicable to the kind of like where I have to be thinking as a leader who runs, an organization that produces daily journalism.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that certainly makes sense. And it sounds like there's a lot of accountability that as the leader who's carrying a lot of weight, a lot of different pieces of the puzzle, and constantly you're working over here and you're trying to think of your team. You're working over here and thinking of innovations and things that are coming. And it sounds like a lot of the things you're looking for in terms of leadership is like, the word that come to my head is like buy-in for what we're doing, our future, our team, like our team just depends on the success of what we're doing, and we need to continue moving forward to make those things a reality. Yeah.
Making innovative moves while not losing your soul and not losing sight of what your standards are. I mean, for us, we've gone all in on video and really, I would say it's been about a year now, and we've made tremendous strides there. And one of the reasons why that's a significant part of the growth of our business in this moment and in the future is that the diversification of consumption of news is really swinging toward watching the news or consuming the news through, whatever social platform or even through mainstream platforms, traditional, but not reading it, watching it, or listening to it. And if you look at the audiences, sort of by category of age. Younger people have a tendency to spend more time watching video and consuming news that way. And that's not just for the doom scrollers out there. I mean, I think that's just sort of kind of, again, in this moment, the way that, they're wired, and so you have to respect that. I mean, in the same way that publishers and broadcasters had to respect the fact that this internet thing wasn't just going to go away. I mean, that you had to create a product, but you have to create these products in my space from the core of what you do. And to make sure that as you're moving across platforms, media platforms, that you don't have a deterioration of your values or, your core deliverable, just to go and be attractive to other people. So for us, that's been, we have not crossed that line into opinion, and we're not going to. There's too much of that. And so for us to get the maximization of the resources that we have, I mean, it's the core reporting. And for us, still, most things start in print.
Yeah.
But then once you have that, there's a lot that you can do with it. And I think we've demonstrated that, and that's been a driver of our growth.
Yeah. Well, and you look at, we were talking about with the social medias, you mentioned influencers, and I like the one comment you made earlier when you were saying, they're really just taking another source and then putting their own spin or, opinion on it. And that's things that we as consumers need to be conscientious of, whether we're on TikTok or we're on the web and we're searching something, or we're on Twitter or Facebook, wherever it is. We just have to have that understanding of those different platforms and what we're consuming in terms of content and whatnot. So appreciate you breaking that all down. And got one last fun question for you.
Okay.
A little bit on the easier side. We've had some really good discussions here in regards to news and leadership and whatnot. This is a fun one. It's kind of how I've been ending some of the episodes of the podcast. I'm going to tie things back into the beginning as we were talking about prep and whatnot. So this question is, if you go back in time, Chris, to June of 1986 and speak at your graduation to your classmates, but knowing what you know now, what would you say? What would be the message that you would leave with your classmates at that time?
Oh man, I thought you were going to ask me about that home run I hit against Academy in 1985 off your dad.
We had to get that into the episode somewhere.
I love your dad so much, and he's such a good guy, and I mean he's been my friend for I think since we met. Well, first of all, I was not even in the realm of consideration to be that person who spoke to the class. I think while I was a good student, I wasn't necessarily a great student. I was very much kind of muddled up in the top of the other people that were getting 3.3s or 3.5s or whatever. I would tell you that your grade point average at prep doesn't really matter all that much if it gets you into the college that you need to go to and you maximize the value of the college. I'm not sure that I exactly did that, but I was able to to get to work and to make things happen early in my career, and I cared about what I was doing. I would say for the current crop of graduates is that this is a marathon and not a sprint. Be a lifelong learner. Be open to changing your mind, and be open to the idea, in particular as a career for younger people now, that whatever it is that you want to go into, that industry may change. It may not even exist. By the time that that it's all said and done. I mean, you get out of Cathedral Prep and you're 17, 18, 19 years old. You're probably going to work until you're in your mid 60s or your late 60s. Be open to taking on challenges that that you might think don't have anything to do with where you want to be or what you want to do. I will tell you that was the best thing in the world for me to leave journalism, to be able to come back to it. And while that was hard, and there was a lot that went along with it, like I said, I mean, I used to travel internationally, and prior to that, I traveled all over the country, in my role running a creative agency or as the president of a creative agency. And it's you're going to learn a lot. You're going to meet a lot of people that are interesting, and you're going to have opportunities to do things that you would have never imagined. And it's probably advisable to act on some of them. And the better that you are at the work that you care about, the more valuable you ultimately will become in the broader marketplace of ideas. And even if you start your path doing something, that there's plenty of time for you to grow as a person and to evolve into doing something that you might find interesting later in life, if you've been very good at the things that you've done in the past and cared about the details that allowed you to not just do a job, but I mean to grow as a person and as a professional. So I don't know how well that would have resonated, for the class of 1986. I do not remember what our valedictorian said, and I'm not even sure that I remember who our valedictorian was. I'm sure that they were brilliant and they went to an Ivy League school or the equivalent, and I probably should have been paying closer attention. I might have gotten farther faster.
Well, and what you said there too was talk about that mentality of how we approach our careers, our professions. Don't just see this as a job, see it as a learning opportunity, even if it's not the most ideal thing you set out to do. I mean, when you were graduating in 1986, you weren't thinking of this concept of the internet at the time. You weren't thinking of this concept of social media. You weren't thinking of AI. But to your point, you just kind of keep consecutively stacking up these experiences, doing your best in what you've been given. And then in the future, it's going to lead to bigger and better things that you don't even know you can comprehend. And it's kind of how we all have to approach it.
I think it comes down to don't be afraid of the future. I mean, the one constant is change.
Right.
And, I think like my experience at prep prepared me for that. The challenges that we faced, as you move along at prep, freshman year is hard. Sophomore year was very, very difficult for me. I don't know what it was. Mike Alexa was a great geometry teacher. I used to drive him crazy because I just didn't get it, and that didn't help me as I made my way through to Pat Sidetuck. Forgive me. It would have been I think it would have been Pat Sidetuck my junior year, and then Miss Maxwell, my senior year. They were very kind to me to help me to pick up the things that maybe I didn't get, all the way back to when I started with Stan Brzezicki in special honors math, which I was not qualified to take because I never had even an algebra class, I don't think, at St. Andrews. But that willingness to be to try, and to commit and to have the support from those that understand, like, okay, this is not a goofy kid or a dumb kid. This is somebody that just doesn't get it. They don't slow it down for you, but they'll give you the help to get you up to speed. And that's, I think that's an important lesson in life, that the world doesn't slow down for you. You've got to catch up with it. And so, yeah, it's funny. I mean, this has been a fun conversation because I've got to think about some things that I hadn't thought about for a long time. And I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on as a guest, taking some time to chat with us today. We probably could have spent another 2-3 hours chatting in depth with some of the other
Joe
things.
Rogan left if we let it be.
Yeah, that's right. The Jimmy Smith, the Rambler experience,
That's
the episode name. But that's too funny. Well, no, in all sincerity, Chris, really appreciate you coming on the episode today. It's been great chatting with you. I know I got value out of it, and I'm sure the listeners who have been with us through the episode have as well. So we really appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to be with you and World Ramblers.
That's right. Thanks again.
You bet.